The largest car carrier ever built slides into a Mexican port with 9,200 electric vehicles packed across 16 decks. Painted on the hull in letters 2 stories tall is the name of a car company, not a shipping line. For 100 years, no automaker owned ocean-going vessels. They built cars and paid specialists to carry them across the sea. Then one company broke that rule so completely that in 20 months it assembled a private fleet of 8 ships, capable of moving more than 1 million vehicles a year to ports in Europe, South America, and Australia without asking a single shipping company for a slot. That company is BYD. And while most of the world was paying attention to battery chemistry and charging speeds, it quietly became the only automaker on Earth with its own deep-sea fleet. What triggered this was a pricing shock so extreme it sounds invented. In 2021, chartering a car-carrying ship cost about $12,500 a day. By early 2024, that same vessel ran $115,000. China was producing millions more cars than the global fleet could transport, and the small number of companies that owned the boats knew exactly what they had. If you are finding this interesting, please hit the like button because these videos take enormous effort to research, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. There is a strange mechanical feature hidden inside these ships that almost nobody outside the shipping world knows about. And there is a glaring problem with the entire plan that involves the trip home. But first, you need to understand the invisible industry that made all of this possible. The invisible industry that moves everything. There is a lesson in commercial history that resurfaces once every generation to punish whoever forgot it. The greatest trading powers were never the ones who made the finest goods. They were the ones who controlled how goods moved. Venice dominated the Mediterranean through its fleet, not its looms. The Dutch East India Company ran the spice trade by controlling the sea lanes, not by growing spices. Britain built an empire on the Royal Navy and its merchant marine, not on its factories alone. Whoever controls movement sets the price of everything that moves. For 100 years, the global auto industry forgot this lesson entirely. Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, Hyundai, every major car maker built vehicles and then handed them to a specialist shipping company to carry across oceans. The specialists had names most people have never heard. Wallenius Wilhelmsen, NYK, K-Line, Hug Grimaldi. These companies operated one of the most quietly profitable niches in global trade, and their success depended on staying invisible. Shipping is the only industry on Earth that measures its success by how completely you ignore it. Between 80 and 90% of everything you own arrived by sea, and you have never spent 1 second wondering how. You only hear about logistics when something breaks. A vessel jams the Suez Canal for 6 days, and suddenly everyone with a phone becomes a salvage expert. A drought empties the Panama Canal, and casual observers develop strong opinions about water levels. Then the crisis passes and shipping vanishes from your mind again. That is by design. Within that invisible world, the corner that carries finished vehicles is even more hidden. You can't efficiently ship a car in a standard shipping container. Chinese export has tried for years. The vehicle gets strapped down, wrapped in protective material, and you are paying to transport empty air around it. The damage rate is ugly, so the industry uses ROR, short for roll-on, roll-off. A RORO carrier is essentially a floating multi-story parking garage, flat decks linked by internal ramps with a stern door that drops onto the dock. Cars drive aboard under their own power, one by one. No cranes, no containers, just a long line of vehicles and crews with clipboards. The arrangement between car makers and shipping companies was stable for decades. Car makers got flexible capacity without owning expensive steel. Shipping companies ran complex operations across dozens of trade routes, mixing cargo types and directions so that decks stayed profitable no matter which way the ship was headed. They held advantages that went beyond the vessels themselves. Berth priority at congested terminals, relationships with port authorities built over generations, pools of experienced crew, insurance histories that made underwriters comfortable. It was a closed system with high walls, and for a century, nobody on either side had any reason to tear them down. The system was so smooth that nobody questioned it, which is exactly when it became dangerous, because hidden underneath all that efficiency was a fragile foundation. The global car carrier fleet had been quietly shrinking for years. The vessels still sailing were getting old, and the order books for replacements were nearly empty. Then China started building cars at a pace that would break the entire system wide open. The squeeze that changed everything. To understand why BYD felt forced to build its own ships, you need to understand one uncomfortable truth about the global car carrier fleet. Nobody had invested in new vessels in years, and the ships still in service were aging fast. The reason traces back to 28. The financial crisis demolished car sales worldwide. Shipping companies were stuck with expensive vessels and nothing to carry. Rates collapsed, orders were canceled. An entire generation of maritime executives absorbed a lesson that became doctrine. Never build a car carrier on speculation, so they stopped. For more than a decade, new orders were basically non-existent. Old ships reached retirement and went to the scrapyard. Nothing replaced them. The fleet shrank quietly year after year. Nobody noticed because demand was flat too. Then two forces collided at exactly the same time. First, COVID ended, and consumers went on a massive car buying spree with cash saved during lockdowns. Second, China's auto exports went vertical. In 2019, China exported roughly 700,000 vehicles, barely a rounding error in global terms, then 3.11 million in 2022, then 4.91 million in 2023, the year China overtook Japan to become the biggest vehicle exporter on the planet, then 5.86 million in 2024, and in 2025, somewhere above 7 million, depending on whose numbers you use. Now, hold those two facts together. A shipping fleet that had been shrinking for 15 years, and a Chinese export curve that shot nearly straight up in 4. What happened next is not a mystery. It is arithmetic. Demand explodes. Supplies frozen. You can't snap your fingers and make a ship appear. Building one takes years, so charter rates climb. Owners realize their aging vessels are suddenly gold mines and stop scrapping them. Prices for used ships go through the roof. Every automaker that needs ocean transport starts bidding against every other automaker for the same shrinking pools. Then the shortage feeds on itself. As rates climb, owners lock ships into long charters at the peak, which removes those vessels from the market for years, which shrinks the pool further, which drives rates higher again. The actual numbers are almost hard to believe. Before COVID, renting a mid-size car carrier cost about $17,000 a day. In August 2022, Nissan renewed a charter on a single vessel for $100,000 a day. By late 2023, the one-year rate for a 6,500 car vessel hit $115,000 a day. That is roughly a 9-fold jump in about 3 years for a service that had barely evolved in half a century. Think about what that means in practical terms. Renting one ship for a single month now costs about $4.5 million. The expense of moving a car from a factory in Shenzhen to a dealership in Europe was no longer a minor line item. It was becoming a major chunk of the sticker price. And if your entire business model is built on being the affordable option, the ocean was now eating your profit on every vehicle. But the money was not even the worst part. The bigger problem was control. A charter is a contract, and a contract has an owner. If a competitor locks up a vessel for 3 years, it is gone. It does not matter how much cash you offer. It does not matter how good your cars are or how many you have lined up at the dock. Your factory can be running perfectly, your order books can be full, and your vehicles just sit in a parking lot in the rain. That is the moment the realization hit. BYD was not competing with Volkswagen for customers. It was competing with everyone for space on boats, and that realization set the stage for a decision that would make BYD the only car company on Earth with its own deep-sea fleet. The decision nobody saw coming. In 2022, BYD made an announcement that plenty of seasoned industry watchers considered reckless. It planned to spend roughly $687 million building its own fleet of car carriers, starting with 7 vessels. Founder and chairman Wang Chuanfu stated the reason plainly. China's car exports were surging, and there were not enough ships to carry them. The reaction ranged from polite skepticism to open amusement. Automakers don't buy ships. That is not what automakers do. On January 9, 2024, the first vessel arrived at Yantai Port in Shandong Province to begin loading. She was 200 meters long, 38 meters wide, with 13 decks and a top speed of 19 knots. Her name was written across the hull in letters visible from across the harbor: BYD Explorer No. 1. She took on fuel, sailed south to Shenzhen to fill her decks, and in mid-January departed China, carrying more than 5,000 electric vehicles bound for the Netherlands and Germany. The crossing took 41 days. That first voyage made headlines. What came after is what actually mattered, and it happened fast. December 2024 brought the second ship. January 2025 brought the third, a milestone because BYD owned it outright rather than chartering. April 2025 is where the story shifts from logistics to spectacle. The BYD Shenzhen was christened on April 22nd. She carried 9,200 vehicles across 16 decks. At the moment she entered service, she was the largest car carrier ever built anywhere in the world. A Chinese automaker with barely 2 years of shipping experience now possesses the biggest vehicle transport vessel on the ocean. Her first trip went to Brazil. In June 2025, 2 more ships arrived within 4 days of each other, both with 9,200 car capacity. One of them loaded 7,000 electric vehicles and sailed directly for Italy, the UK, Spain, and Belgium without stopping. July brought another. September brought another. That was number 8. 8 ships in 20 months, starting from zero. Together, that fleet gives BYD the ability to export more than 1 million vehicles a year on vessels it controls. The company has signaled that number 8 is likely the last for now. But how did BYD pull this off so fast? If Volkswagen decided tomorrow it wanted 8 new car carriers, the answer from every major shipyard would be the same: get in line. Shipbuilding slots are booked years ahead. BYD skipped the line because the line is in China. In 2025, Chinese shipyards produced more than 56% of all new shipping tonnage on Earth and captured about 69% of all new orders by weight. That is 16 straight years as the #1 shipbuilding nation. 6 of the world's 10 largest shipbuilders are Chinese. This is the piece that almost all Western reporting on Chinese electric vehicles misses entirely. BYD's fleet is not a lucky gamble. It is the natural result of a country that spent 20 years becoming the dominant shipbuilder on the planet, now also becoming the dominant car exporter. A European automaker trying the same move would be waiting until the 2030s. BYD was dealing with a yard down the coast. The financial logic is stark. A modern car carrier costs a fortune to buy, but compared with paying $100,000 a day to rent one, it is remarkably cheap to operate. It is rent versus mortgage. BYD estimates that owning its fleet cuts per vehicle shipping cost by 30 to 40%, with potential savings exceeding $1 billion annually. But the savings are not the real prize. A chartered ship is a favor, an owned ship is a fact. And in December 2025, BYD proved exactly what that difference is worth. Mexico had announced new tariffs on Chinese imports, effective January 1st. Every Chinese exporter needed to land cars before that deadline. The BYD Shenzhen slipped her moorings in late November, crossed the Pacific through bad weather, and docked at Lazaro Cardenas on December 21st, with 11 days to spare. Millions in duty avoided. Not one phone call to a shipping line. But before we get to the flaw at the heart of this plan, let's climb aboard and see what is actually inside these vessels. Inside the hull of a floating parking garage. The interior of one of these vessels is genuinely strange. Stand on the dock and look up. A modern car carrier has none of the romance you associate with ships. There's no elegant curve, no graceful silhouette. It is a slab, a rectangular steel box 16 stories tall that happens to float. From certain angles, it looks less like a vessel and more like a parking structure that broke loose and drifted into the sea. The rear ramp drops, and on these ships, you will frequently find loading doors at the back, the front, and the side. The more entry points, the faster you can fill it. Then the choreography begins. Cars are driven aboard one at a time by human drivers, hundreds of them working in a non-stop relay. Up the ramp, along the deck, into position, driver hops out, walks back down, gets in the next car. Some ports use bicycles or small shuttles to ferry drivers back to the dock. Loading a 9,000-car ship is not a quick crane operation. It is hours of constant human movement, planned to the minute. Because every minute a vessel sits at port, it is burning money. Now here is the feature that almost nobody outside the shipping world has heard of, the decks move. Modern car carriers have hoistable decks, sections of deck that can be raised or lowered using hydraulics to change the ceiling height between levels. So on one trip, the ship packs in thousands of small hatchbacks with ceilings set low. On the next, it raises the decks and carries tall cargo like buses, tractors, construction equipment. It is essentially a building that reconfigures its own floors based on what needs to move. That flexibility is the single biggest reason the ROR model works at all. Here is a piece of industrial trivia worth knowing. The standard unit for measuring capacity is called the CEU, or Car Equivalent Unit. It is based on the dimensions of one specific vehicle, a 1966 Toyota Corona. When you read that the BYD Shenzhen carries 9,200 vehicles, the technical meaning is that it holds 9,260 units of space measured by that old Toyota size. Electric vehicles complicate all of this. They are heavier than their gasoline equivalents. Their battery packs hold stored energy that a parked gas car does not, which changes the fire risk profile. Most operators now restrict how fully charged a battery can be when the car rolls aboard. Fire detection and suppression systems have had to be redesigned. Insurance companies have strong feelings about this, and those feelings come with high premiums. BYD's newer ships run on LNG dual fuel systems, burning liquefied natural gas, which helps them comply with tightening emissions rules and gives Explorer No. 1 a range of 15,800 nautical miles on a single fill. That is not an environmental gesture. It is a calculation that these ships need to stay legal in European waters for the next 25 years. So picture the machine, a 16-story floating steel structure carrying enough cars to populate a small town, with hydraulic floors that reconfigure on demand, powered by gas, crossing the Pacific at roughly the speed of a person on a bicycle. It is remarkable, and it carries a problem at its core that almost nobody wants to discuss. The half of the voyage nobody talks about. Every voyage a car carrier makes has two parts, and only one of them earns money. BYD loads ships in China and sends them to Europe, Brazil, Mexico, and Australia. Full decks, 9,000 cars packed tight. That outbound leg is beautiful. Then the ship has to come home, and Europe does not send 9,000 cars back to China. Neither does Brazil. Neither does Australia. In April and May of 2025, 3 BYD vessels arrived in Brazil, packed to capacity, racing to deliver before a tariff increase. All three departed empty. Tracking data confirms what the numbers suggest. BYD runs its exports on its own ships, even when that means sailing home with nothing aboard. Here is why that stings. An empty ship burns almost as much fuel as a full one. It still pays the same crew, the same port dues, the same insurance, the same canal fees. Every nautical mile of that return trip is pure loss, subtracted from whatever the outbound leg earned. This is not a minor issue. It is the issue. It is the entire reason traditional car-carrying companies exist in the first place. The established carriers like Wallenius Wilhelmsen, NYK, and Hug survive because they never rely on a single customer or a single route. Their vessels carry Japanese cars to Europe, European machinery to the Middle East, used vehicles to Africa. They spend decades building the connective tissue that keeps decks full in both directions, so a ship is never wasting fuel on an empty return. BYD has so far chosen speed and control over that kind of efficiency. While export volume is doubling every year and the priority is beating tariff deadlines, that is a defensible trade-off. But it is also the weakest point in the entire strategy, which is why a phrase, BYD, used back in January 2024 keeps echoing. When Explorer number 1 set sail, BYD stated that the vessel would be open to partners while serving BYD. Think about what that means. The fleet is not just infrastructure, it is a product. BYD can sell deck space to other Chinese automakers, the same automakers it is fighting for customers in Europe and South America. Your competitor is now also your landlord. That is exactly why BYD created a dedicated logistics subsidiary, with reported plans reaching into port operations and broader shipping services rather than simply running 8 boats for itself. Because the moment those return voyages start carrying someone else's cargo, European industrial equipment heading back to Asia, other companies' vehicles on routes BYD already serves, the fleet stops being a cost. It becomes a business. A car company that accidentally builds a shipping line is something the world has not really seen before, and BYD is not alone. SAIC has moved into logistics. Geely has done the same. Chery, which exported 1.34 million vehicles in 2025, more than any other Chinese automaker, has expanded into shipping services. This is not one company going rogue. It is an entire national auto industry deciding it would rather own the boats than beg for space on them, which raises a much larger question about what this means for the future of how things get made and moved, the bigger picture behind the fleet. Step back from BYD for a moment because something larger is shifting. For most of the 20th century, the dominant model in manufacturing was specialization. You focus on the thing you do best, and you buy everything else from whoever does it better. Ford does not smelt its own steel anymore. Apple does not own the factories that make its chips. This approach is efficient, logical, and for about 40 years it was completely correct. But it relied on one assumption: the things you chose not to own would always be available when you needed them at a price you could predict. The last 6 years have dismantled that assumption piece by piece. Semiconductor shortages in 2021, shipping capacity crises in 2022 and 2023, Red Sea disruptions from late 2023 when major shipping lines suspended transits, and the Asia-Europe route added 2 weeks detouring around Africa. Then tariffs, port fees, and retaliatory charges piling up. In October 2025, the United States imposed fees on Chinese-built vessels. China responded with fees on American ones. Both were dropped within weeks under a trade truce. That whipsaw is the operating environment now. In that environment, the calculation inverts. The new model is not about specializing. It is about controlling the product from raw material to showroom. The lithium, the battery cell, the semiconductor, the motor, the body, the ship, the dealership. BYD is the most complete expression of that idea operating anywhere on Earth, and the fleet of ships is the piece that makes it visible. You can debate battery chemistry for hours, but a 200-meter vessel with your company's name on the side is not an abstraction. It is the argument made out of steel. There is a strategic layer here worth stating plainly. Controlling freight has always been a form of power. An industrial power that owns the means of moving its own goods is far harder to pressure than one that rents them. That holds whether the pressure comes from a tariff schedule, a shipping cartel, a conflict, or a storm. BYD is not alone in working this out. Chery, SAIC, and Geely have all pushed into logistics. This is a whole industry deciding it will no longer wait for permission. Now, there is a real counter-argument. A ship is a 25-year commitment. BYD has poured enormous capital into a bet that export demand stays strong for decades, and nobody, including BYD, can predict the market that far out. Owning a fleet looks brilliant during a shortage. During a glut, it looks like a giant pile of fixed costs you can't offload quickly. Rates have already dropped sharply from their peak, and analysts have been openly discussing the possibility of too many ships chasing too few cars by 2026. If that happens, chartering gets cheap again, and the companies that stayed flexible look smart. The tariff landscape is also a moving target. The European Union placed duties on Chinese electric vehicles in 2024. Washington has proposed fees on foreign-built car carriers. Rules can shift faster than you can reroute a ship. BYD is also building factories in Brazil, Hungary, Thailand, and Uzbekistan. Every car made locally is a car that never needs a ship. There is a plausible future where the fleet becomes less essential precisely because BYD expanded so successfully. But strip away the caveats, and here is what remains. A battery company that became a car maker was quoted $100,000 a day for a boat, decided it had had enough, and bought 8 of them. It gained the capacity to move more than 1 million cars a year across oceans without a single conversation with a shipping line, and it still has not solved the return trip. Nobody covered this properly because it happened in a corner of the world economy that only becomes visible when something breaks. The thing is, nothing broke, and that is exactly why you never heard about it. If this gave you something to think about, please hit the like button. These videos take serious research to put together, and your support genuinely helps. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. There are related videos on the screen right now if you want to keep going. So here's the question for the comments. A car company buying its own fleet of ocean-going ships? Is that the smartest industrial move of the decade, or a gamble that just hasn't caught up with them yet? Let me know, 'cause I read every comment